Dragon's Dogma has to be one of the most overlooked RPGs in recent memory. First appearing on the Xbox 360 and PS3, it introduced players to an engrossing world and story that managed to back it all up with stellar gameplay. It saw you taking on the role of the Arisen, a person whose heart is literally torn out of their chest by a dragon. Interestingly, this does not kill the Arisen. How that is possible and what it means is part of the mystery behind the role the player enjoys. As well as the main character, the player also has to contend with something known as a pawn, which you also have complete control over their initial appearance, skill and gear allocation, allowing you to create one that suits your style of play best. Like the main character, your pawn will gain levels and learn new skills that you choose, and equip new items from among those you find, buy or enhance. The best thing about this system is that other real-world players' pawns can be summoned into your party and acts as a sort of pseudo-multiplayer feature that brings a real, unique aspect to the game's combat. Speaking of combat, you will find almost all of your skills have genuine uses, so choosing which ones to map to your controller will often be situational and requires a lot of thought on the part of the player to get the balance right. Although the game isn't perfect by any means, with many aspects of the story and structure of the game bringing it down, it still is an incredible adventure to undertake and feels like a solid foundation that can be built upon in the future. Thankfully, the recently announced sequel will be with us soon, so hopefully some of the issues presented with Dark Arisen will be rectified and result in a far superior experience. Mad Max is quite possibly one of the most underrated games to ever exist, and although there were some clear issues with it, the bad reputation it received never felt truly justified. It sees you taking on the role of Max, and the opening minutes of the game see his precious car being stolen by a rival gang. This prompts Max to travel the wasteland, making new allies and enemies as he gathers parts to build his magnum opus, a powerful and customizable new car. It's not the most elaborate plot by any means, amounting mostly to a series of collection missions as you slowly piece together a car capable of achieving revenge. And as a result, it's not going to win any awards for quality, as it's mostly a short, circular plot that serves as an excuse to funnel the player from area to area while they spend most of their time exploring the wasteland. Thankfully, exploring is the most engaging part of Mad Max. It's all split up into a series of regions, each run by a warlord that oversees their respective stronghold. Once allied with the leader of a region, Max can help to outfit the stronghold with different features that give Max benefits when returning, such as healing your health, ammo, and collecting scraps that serve as the wasteland's currency. Scrap is always needed, giving players a reason to keep scouring the map for every last piece. And on top of upgrading strongholds, both the magnum opus and Max himself can be upgraded as well, which not only makes you more likely to survive the dangers of the wasteland, but offers up visual changes as well. This results in a real sense of reward and progression as you go from a ragtag hobo to one of the most badass threats in the wasteland. If you're a fan of the films or open worlds in general, you'll likely find something to love here. Odin Sphere is essentially a remastered port of the PlayStation 2 classic that manages to bring along with it some minor changes and new inclusions that help the game excel even further than it already did all those years ago. You take on the adventure as one of 5 different characters that all possess a powerful weapon known as a cipher, and as you would expect, each character comes with their own set of actions and abilities that you can level up. But you must complete each story before advancing to the next, with these 5 separate tales intersecting at certain points. Now when it comes to gameplay, Odin Sphere is technically an RPG thanks to leveling up as you play, spending skill points and upgrading your abilities, but the minute-to-minute action plays out more like a beat-em-up that sees you linking together attacks, slides and aerial juggles until the often stressful amount of enemies on screen are defeated. What stands out to me is just how responsive the controls are, and there's a good reason for this, as carrying out some of the more ambitious attacks require precise input, and once you begin to successfully land long strings of moves, it's a feeling that just never gets old. Now a real standout aspect of the game is its visual style that at points looks like a painting in motion. Each location, enemy and boss all receive the same love and attention to detail, and furthermore it's all delivered at a blistering 60 frames per second that never buckles under the weight of the on-screen action, even in some of the more hectic situations. situations you'll find yourself in throughout the adventure. All in all, Odin Sphere is the definition of a perfect remaster. Every issue with the original was addressed, without ruining what made it so special in the first place. This is one game that deserves a spot in every PlayStation 4 owner's collection. Fighting EX Layer is a spiritual successor to both the Street Fighter EX series, as well as the original one-off Fighting Layer. The gameplay is fast and frantic, and the emphasis on movement and swift punishes feel quite different to the set play and turn-taking that is prevalent in other fighting games. The button layout is the same as Street Fighter's, with the 3 button and 3 kick buttons, and you're able to grab with the same input, as well as perform special moves in the same manner as well. For the roster, you have a good selection of characters to choose from, with around 12 warriors, with only about 2 of them playing similar to each other. You'll definitely find someone that you'll enjoy playing as, given the amount of variety that's on offer. Now, one of the most unique elements of EX Layer is its ghoulie system. Before a match begins, you'll select a deck of cards which serve as a series of objectives in the match, like dealing so much damage or using so many special attacks, for example. And when you fulfill those objectives, you get a buff of some kind, like more damage, or you become faster. But the system goes beyond simple buffs, as there's also cards for turning invisible, draining health from the enemy, boosting the rate of the super meter, and much more. It's a really interesting system for the most part, and you can use it to enhance a character's strengths or cover their weaknesses respectively. If you're a fighting fan and have played the likes of Street Fighter to death and are looking for something unique to jump into, Fighting EX Layer offers up a respectable fighting experience, albeit with a few caveats that stop it from achieving true greatness. Ruiner is a stylish action shooter set in the future of a cyber metropolis, where the player takes up the fight as a brutal killer on a journey to ultimately find his missing brother. To do so, you'll have to explore the bowels of the city, where life isn't exactly great. A lot of disturbing ways of life are present throughout the game, and through its vast lore entries and collectibles, you can read up on them in depth. Honestly, this is one of those rare games where the entries are actually worth reading, because the world that Rycon built is incredible, twisted and vibrant, and every chance you get to find some more info on your surroundings, it's definitely worth taking. Now, when it comes to gameplay, this is where Ruiner truly comes into its own. With a horde of inventive weapons and abilities, mixed with skills like dashing and being able to hack the minds of your enemies, the combat soon becomes the star of the show. As you make your way through the game, you'll slowly start unlocking more ways to tackle enemies, which is facilitated by the skill tree system and allows you to build your character as you see fit. It's this freedom that allows Ruiner to offer up a tailored experience. If you're a player who likes to go all out, guns a-blazing, then you can certainly do so. But if you're a more reserved type of player, then there are plenty of abilities which offer up different ways to approach each encounter with an enemy. Now, one of the most striking aspects of the game are the visuals. The blood-drenched aesthetics of the futuristic city are drop-dead gorgeous. From the underground slums to the industrial wastelands, everything is complemented by muted neon colors, giving off a cyberpunk vibe that feels like it was ripped straight out of something like Blade Runner. It's clear to see the game's obvious influences, but what makes it work is the way in which it's delivered, with confidence, style, and more importantly, its fun and engaging gameplay. Concrete Genie is an artistic adventure that manages to couple the harsh realities of bullying with a truly creative aspect that helps bring colour and life to a rundown city known as Danska. Families and businesses abandoned it years ago, leaving its streets to be the hunting grounds for a group of troublesome bullies. Ash, the main protagonist, runs into them and has his precious notebook that he uses to draw a destroy. But it's here that Ash meets the mysterious yet lovable Luna, one of Ash's creations brought to life, who wants you to restore Danska and gives you a magical paintbrush with which you can complete the task. The easiest way to describe Concrete Genie's gameplay is infamous for kids. The parkour, movement, and general feel were reminiscent of the PlayStation 4 launch title Infamous Second Son, and in order to restore Danska to its former glory, you move through 3 different areas, illuminating the lights within each of its zones. Restoring power to the many lights found within Danska simply requires you to paint on nearby walls. Thankfully, it's easy to do. and after whipping out your paintbrush with the push of a button, you can use either motion controls or the right analog stick to move a pointer around the screen, and then unleash your creativity from a generous amount of preset images, allowing you to breathe new life into the decaying city. One more aspect of the gameplay that contributes to your success are the use of genies. Ash has the ability to create them and can use them to manipulate the environment. Fire genies can burn things, electric genies can power things, and wind genies can blow things around. These genies are adorable, brightly coloured monsters, and there are a lot of fun interactions with them. You can play games with them, give them high fives, and they'll scoot around while you're exploring and do cute little things. Concrete Genie is still a charming little adventure that's easy to jump into for players of all ages and skill. Huntdown is a love letter to the video games of the 80s with a modern twist. The likes of Contra, Blade Runner, and even RoboCop clearly play a role in its influences, and it presents players with a lightning-fast side-scrolling shooter that can be incredibly challenging, but an absolute joy to play at the same time. You get to choose from one of 3 different characters from the outset, with each of them having their own pros and cons, such as different styles of weapons, so it's a good idea to try each of them out and see which one you can settle into best. What helps set Huntdown apart from its contemporaries is the way in which players can actually use the terrain of each level to their advantage. You can duck behind boxes and step into doorways for cover, as well as leaping above your targets with a chance to flank them. The game is comprised of 4 different areas, which consist of 5 levels each to work through. 4 of these levels end with a fight with one of the gang leader's henchmen, and then finally the 5th is with the leader themselves. This is where Huntdown excels, as if you're not prepared, each leader will wipe the floor with you, unless you have a full command of all the abilities at your fingertips. It's not the most original game in the world, and its 20 levels can be somewhat short, especially if you play at low levels of difficulty, but this indie title will attract the attention of most veteran players and lovers of games such as Metal Slug or Pro Protector. It's an absolute frenzy of shooting, explosions, ruthless deaths, and final bosses that will delight a very particular group of players. With many details and a vibrant world to make your way through, Huntdown is without a doubt one of the best games out there. If there is one game on this list that you play, this is the one you do not want to skip. Assault Suit Lenos began life way back in 1990, with it releasing on the Sega Genesis. At the time, the game was praised for its impressive use of sprites, as well as challenging difficulty that cemented it as one of the best games on the console. Fast forward to 2016, and a remake of the game made its way to the PlayStation 4 and PC that brought along improved visuals and tweaked gameplay that made it the definitive way to enjoy this classic. The events of the game take place in the distant future and revolve around Earth's fight against a cyborg army that have travelled light years to reclaim the world for themselves. This is where you come in and take up the fight as Rex, who pilots an assault suit, a 12-foot tall armoured battle mech with powerful fighting capabilities. Assault Suit Lenos is played like most old-school run-and-gun shooters. It's not as fast as Contra, but it often requires more strategic thinking to take out enemy forces. Before each mission, you decide which weapons and upgrades you want to equip for the task at hand, and careful consideration is needed, otherwise you'll often find yourself in a tough spot, as the enemies take no prisoners and aren't afraid to challenge the player with each and every step they take. This unforgiving nature of the game is where most of the fun lies, and even though you'll find yourself dying quite often at the outset, after getting used to the mechanics in place, it all soon becomes second nature. Now there's about 10 stages in total, which naturally escalate in their intensity the further you progress, with everything eventually becoming a blur of neon bullets and effects that light up the screen. It's very much an arcade title, plain and simple. With only a handful of levels, the grueling difficulty gives the game more worth. If you're a fan of run-and-gun shooters, then Assault Suit Lenos is an absolute must. The Order takes place in a reimagined Victorian-era London and focuses on a group of knights from the Knights of the Round Table. Their role is to not only fight against threats to the kingdom, but also against supernatural abominations known as the Lycans that currently inhabit London. After a long, brutal war, the tide is finally turning thanks to the breakthroughs made by the Industrial Revolution, allowing the knights to take advantage of a range of gadgets and firepower that's managed to give them the upper hand. Now the gameplay is delivered in the form of a third-person shooter shooter and sees the player encountering a variety of enemies across the city whilst utilizing cover and weapons to overcome each and every threat. This was one of the main complaints with the game when it released, however, as it does admittedly become a bit tedious jumping from gunfight to gunfight only to be broken up by an encounter with a lichen or a cutscene. Thankfully, the story and world building present in the game was enough to draw me in and kept me glued to my seat until the credits roll. It's more of a cinematic experience with a heavy emphasis on QTEs and narrative, with the gameplay unfortunately feeling like a bit of an afterthought. And it's a real shame as well, as the Order had so much potential that ultimately was wasted. If there is anything that will impress you about the Order though, it will likely be the visuals. Simply put, they are gorgeous and rightly represent some of the best graphics on the PlayStation 4 to date. Not only are the graphics themselves fantastic, but so were the character models, especially the facial features and animations. On top of that, the setting just oozes atmosphere thanks to the great environmental design. As I mentioned earlier, the game doesn't really let you explore at all, but what you do get to explore is undeniably beautiful. Although it's incredibly short and ends up feeling more like a movie than a game, The Order 1886 is still well worth giving a go, especially if you never got round to it when it first released. Days Gone is one of those games that never managed to reach its expectations and ultimately didn't achieve the success many thought it would. It's yet another zombie game, which no doubt contributed to the lack of interest from players, as they seem to be a dime a dozen these days. The likes of The Last of Us and Resident Evil, it no doubt got lost in the mix and unfortunately never got its chance in the limelight. As for the game itself, it's an open world that walks the line between survival horror and mindless action, with a crafting system that allows you to create all kinds of tools, from healing to explosives, from weapon upgrades to distractions. The horde mechanic in the game is simply breathtaking, literally as you run your ass off, turning around only momentarily to try and throw a Molotov or grenade back at the hundreds of enemies chasing you. With plenty to explore, collect and play around in, Days Gone is one of the longer entries in the genre you are likely to find. With unique enemies and a new take on the nearly tired zombie enemy trope, you will find yourself loving combat. While not expertly polished, combat is definitely decent with a few issues. All this is not to say the game does not suffer from its share of bugs, glitches and texture drops, and there are plenty of scenes still in the game where other characters' textures won't load properly and take you out the moment. Overall, however, these issues don't take too much away from what is an otherwise incredible adventure. If you find it on the cheap, Days Gone is well worth adding to your collection. Well, that does it for today's video. Keep an eye out for part 2, as that will be coming up soon, so don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to get notified about new videos, and share the show with your friends. You can follow me on all of the socials, which are linked below, to stay up to date, and also join my growing community on Discord to meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters: Rhino, Skill Jim, Shuden, Richard, Amy, Daniel, Paul, Dio, Omar, Strider, Pierre, Carl, Awesome Jacket Dude, Maximus, Scott, Ryan, Alex, GameCube Galaxy, Curse Salaryman and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining my Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find all of these links in the description. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'll catch you next time.